What happens when a group of men mistakes silence for weakness and stillness for fear? What happens when they push the wrong woman and find out too late exactly who they were dealing with? This story starts on a dusty Tulane highway just outside of Beaumont, Texas, on a Saturday afternoon in late September, the kind of day where the heat sits on your shoulders like something heavy and the sky is that flat, washed-out blue that makes everything look a little unreal. Maya Donovan was riding alone. Her motorcycle was a matte black Honda CB 500F, nothing flashy, nothing loud, just clean and efficient, the kind of bike that said she knew what she was doing without needing to announce it. She was wearing her full gear, helmet, jacket, gloves, boots, the kind of rider who never cut corners on safety. Her natural hair was tucked up under the helmet. Her dark eyes stayed focused on the road ahead. She had been riding for 6 years, and she knew every inch of this stretch of highway. She rode it at least twice a month, usually on her way back from visiting her grandmother in Beaumont, a tradition she kept without fail. Maya was 29 years old. She worked as a physical therapist in Houston during the week. She coached youth self-defense classes on Saturday mornings. She was the kind of woman who moved through the world quietly and with purpose, who didn't need to announce herself to anyone because her presence did that on its own. She was not thinking about any of this as she rode. She was thinking about her grandmother's gumbo and the conversation they'd had over the kitchen table about growing older with dignity. She was thinking about the way the afternoon light hit the fields on either side of the highway. She was not thinking about the 4 motorcycles that had pulled up behind her. But she noticed them. She noticed them immediately. Because that's what happens when you've spent years training your body and your mind to stay aware of everything around you. Situational awareness isn't a skill you turn off. It lives in your body like a second heartbeat. The 4 bikes closed the gap between them and are faster than casual riding would explain. They weren't just traveling the same direction. They were positioning. Maya noticed the spacing, 2 flanking wide to her left, 2 tight behind, and her hand stayed steady on the grips. Her heart rate barely moved, but her mind went quiet and sharp, the way it always did when something was about to happen. The first of them pulled up alongside her. He was a big man, heavy through the shoulders, a red bandana around his neck, a patch on his jacket she couldn't read at that speed. He looked over at her with a grin that had nothing friendly in it. He made a gesture with his hand, the universal signal for pull over. Maya kept riding. He made it again, more emphatic this time. She kept her eyes forward. She knew the move. She had seen it before, not on highways, but in the gym, on the mat, in competitions. The pressure before the grab. The signal before the escalation. She wasn't going to make the mistake of stopping somewhere isolated because 4 men on motorcycles decided she should. But then the man on her left swerved toward her. Not into her, not yet, but close enough that she felt the draft of his bike and had to make a micro adjustment to hold her lane. It was calculated. It was meant to unsettle her. She didn't swerve. She didn't brake. She held her line, and she began quietly planning her next 3 moves. That was when the man behind her hit his horn, long and aggressive, and the one beside her shouted something she couldn't fully hear over the engines. But she caught the tone of it. That tone was not a question. There is a rest stop about 2 miles ahead. She knew it well. A wide concrete lot, a few picnic tables, a vending machine, and most importantly, a security camera mounted above the building. She had noted it the first time she stopped there years ago out of habit. She noted things like that. She began calculating whether she could make it there before they forced something on the open road. The man beside her swerved again, closer this time. She made her decision. She eased off the throttle just slightly, enough to let one of the bikes behind her think she was complying, slipping into the gap that created, and then she accelerated hard and clean through the space between the 2 flanking bikes before they could close it. She didn't have to think about it. Her body executed it like a drill she'd run 100 times. She heard them shout behind her. She didn't look back. The rest stop appeared, and she pulled in fast, swinging the bike in a wide arc so she was facing the lot, facing them, her back never to the entrance. She killed the engine and put down the kickstand. She sat on the bike for a 3 count, then dismounted, pulling off her helmet and setting it on the seat. She stood there in the afternoon sun, 5 feet 7 inches, calm as still water, as she looked directly at the 4 men as they pulled into the lot behind her. They were not expecting that. They were expecting her to be small with fear. They were expecting the trembling voice, the nervous glances, the pleading eyes. That is what they had planned around. What they got instead was a woman who looked at them like she was simply waiting to see what poor decision they were going to make next. The big man who had been riding beside her was the first to dismount. He was wide, probably 240, with a scar along his jawline and eyes that had calculated correctly in situations like this before. His name, she would find out later, was Troy Beckett. He had 3 prior arrests for assault, 2 of which had been dropped due to witnesses recanting. He crossed the lot toward her with that particular walk that men like him use when they want to project inevitability. Like whatever was about to happen had already been decided. "Hey, sweetheart," he said, his voice carrying that practiced ease of someone who thinks he's already won. "You got separated from a group? Don't worry. We can keep you company." The other 3 had fanned out behind him, not randomly, in a loose arc-again positioning. Maya let the silence hold for a second. Then she said, simply and clearly, "I'm going to ask you once to get back on your bikes and leave." Troy laughed. His boys laughed. It was the laugh of men who have never been told no by someone they thought couldn't enforce it. "Oh yeah," Troy said, taking another step forward. "Or what?" And that is where he made the mistake. The one he would replay in his head for a long time after. Because what he was looking at was not a woman without options. What he was looking at was a brown belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu with 4 years of Muay Thai training underneath it. What he was looking at was someone who had competed in 3 regional grappling tournaments and placed in the top 2 in every single one. What he was looking at was a woman who spent every Saturday morning teaching young girls exactly what to do when a man like Troy Beckett decided that his size was the only math that mattered. But he didn't know any of that. He just saw the gap between them closing as he took one more step forward and reached out to grab her jacket sleeve. He didn't get to complete the grip. What happened next was fast, and it was not gentle. Maya's left hand came up and broke the grab before it could establish. Her right arm went over his, and her body dropped and turned, using his forward momentum and his own weight to take the angle. Troy Beckett, 240 pounds of him, hit the concrete on his back so fast that the sound was what the other 3 men registered first, before they even fully processed what had moved. He lay there for a second, the wind gone out of him, blinking at the sky. Maya stepped back. She had not been angry during it. She was not angry now. She was simply watching, the way you watch a situation to see what it decides to do next. The second man, shorter and wiry, moved. He came in fast from the left, clearly expecting that she had used her one move and was now exposed. He had not watched the weight distribution on her feet, or he would have known she had not lost her base. He reached the range where his grab would have landed and found nothing there because she had moved offline of his line of attack with one smooth step, and the elbow that caught the side of his head wasn't telegraphed by a single preceding muscle twitch. He went down to one knee, hands coming up to the side of his face, not unconscious but absolutely certain that whatever this was, it was not what he had signed up for. The remaining 2 stopped. They looked at Troy on the ground. They looked at their boy on his knee. They looked at Maya, standing there breathing easy, her weight balanced, her eyes not afraid, not furious, just watching and ready. And something in the math of the moment shifted for them. Nobody moved. Troy sat up slowly, one hand behind him on the concrete. There was a kind of stunned recalibration happening in his face. He had run a version of this situation many times, and it had never produced this result. The result had always followed a certain predictable script, and this woman had not read the script. "You," he started and then stopped. Maya spoke into the pause. "I've already sent my location to 2 people," she said. "I flagged your plates when you pulled up behind me on the highway. That camera up there," she tilted her head toward the building, "has been recording since we pulled in. Now you can make this worse, or you can leave. Another silence. The man on his knee stood up slowly. He said nothing. He looked at the other two. Something passed between them in the economy of men who have run out of options and know it. Troy got his feet. He didn't look at her directly. That was new for him, and she could see it registering in the set of his jaw. He brushed the back of his jacket. He walked back to his motorcycle without a word. The other three followed. They left the rest stop the way they came in, engines loud on the exit, the kind of loud that is the last resort of men who want to appear unbothered. Maya stood in the empty lot for a moment after they were gone. She put a hand on the seat of her bike. She breathed. Her hands were steady. They had been steady the entire time, which was the thing that people who hadn't trained never fully understood. The training didn't make you fearless. It made you functional inside the fear. It meant the fear lived in your body, but it didn't live in your hands. She pulled out her phone, and she did actually text her friend Renee, who was also a trainer at the self-defense gym where Maya coached, a short message. Just left a rest stop outside Beaumont. For guys, situation resolved. About an hour out. Renee's response came back in seconds. You okay? Fine, Maya typed back. All good. She put the helmet back on, started the bike, and pulled back onto the highway. What happened at that rest stop did not go unrecorded. The security camera footage that Maya mentioned was not a bluff. The camera was real and it was running. The attendant inside the rest stop building, a quiet retired man named Gerald who had worked that stretch of highway for 11 years, had watched the entire thing unfold through the window. He had his hand on the phone ready to call 911. He never had to use it, but he did pull the footage and he did file a report with the county sheriff's department the following Monday morning. Troy Beckett and two of the three men with him were identified from their plates. It turned out this was not the first time they had followed a solo rider off the highway and into an isolated location. There were two prior incidents that had never resulted in formal charges because the people involved had been too frightened to come forward or had not gathered enough evidence. Maya's calm, her instinct to pull somewhere with a camera, her presence of mind to note their plates, meant this time was different. The sheriff's department reached out to her a week later. She drove back to Beaumont and gave a full statement. The footage from the rest stop camera was clear. Troy's attempt to grab her jacket was on tape. The second man's approach was on tape. Everything was documented. Charges were filed. Assault and attempted robbery, based on the pattern of behavior that connected this incident to the previous ones. By the time it went to court, two of the prior incidents had been reopened, and one of those individuals had now agreed to testify. Maya was not in the courtroom for the verdict. She was in Houston, in the gym, teaching her Saturday morning youth class. 12 girls between the ages of 10 and 16, moving through drills with the focused energy of people learning something that matters. She was watching a 14-year-old named Priya work through a wrist release technique, correcting the angle of her elbow, when her phone buzzed with a message from the sheriff's department investigator. Guilty on all counts, it read. Sentencing in 6 weeks. Maya looked at it for a moment, then put the phone back in her pocket. Okay, she said to Priya. Again, slower this time. Make sure you own the movement before you speed it up. Priya nodded and reset her stance. Across the mat, two of the other girls were drilling together, one practicing the setup, one practicing the defense. The gym was warm, and it smelled like effort and rubber matting and the particular energy that fills a room when people are learning how to trust themselves. The thing that most people don't understand about self-defense training is that the goal is never violence. The goal is never the fight. The goal is to be so prepared for the worst that the worst becomes unlikely. It is confidence that reads in posture, in the stillness of hands, in the way the eyes don't drop. It is the math of deterrence lived in the body. Troy Beckett had looked at Maya and seen a target. He had read her size, her gender, her race, her apparent aloneness on that highway, and he had calculated an easy outcome. He had not accounted for the variables he couldn't see. The years of training, the competition mat hours, the Saturday mornings spent teaching 12 girls exactly what to do. After class, Renee pulled Maya aside in the parking lot. "Her back from the county," she said. "Guilty." Renee had known since the text that night on the highway that something had happened, but Maya had given her only the outline of it. Now she looked at Maya with that look that old friends have, the one that doesn't need words to carry all the weight. Maya nodded. "Good," she said. "That's good." Renee leaned against her car. "You know, you could have made more out of that. Media, interviews, the whole thing. People would have wanted to hear it." Maya shook her head. "I know, but you don't want that." Maya looked out at the street where the Saturday afternoon traffic moved easy and slow. "No," she said. "I just want those girls in there to know they have options. I want them to walk out of this gym different than they walked in. The rest of it," she paused, "the rest of it is just paperwork." Renee was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "You're the hardest person to impress, you know that." Maya laughed. It was a real one, warm and sudden. They stood there for a minute more, two women in a parking lot in Houston on a Saturday afternoon, the kind of ordinary, extraordinary moment that doesn't make the news but holds the world together anyway. That evening, Maya sat at her kitchen table and called her grandmother in Beaumont. They talked for an hour, about nothing in particular, about gumbo and the weather and a neighbor's new dog and a show her grandmother was watching. Maya did not mention the rest stop or the court case or Troy Beckett. That story was filed and settled, and she didn't need to carry it into this phone call. Her grandmother asked her at the end, as she always did, "Are you being careful on that bike?" "Yes, ma'am," Maya said. "Always." "Good," her grandmother said, "because the world doesn't always deserve what it gets, and you need to stay in it." Maya smiled. "Yes, ma'am," she said again. After they hung up, she sat for a moment in the quiet of her kitchen. The kind of quiet that isn't empty, the kind that's full of things considered and resolved and set down properly. She thought about those girls on the mat today, about Priya and her wrist release, about the youngest one, a 10-year-old named Cecily, who had started the session too hesitant to make real contact and ended it throwing techniques with something new and fierce in hers in her eyes. She thought about the highway outside Beaumont and 4 motorcycles fanning out behind her. She thought about the concrete lot and the camera she'd remembered and the 3 count she'd given herself before she got off the bike. She thought about Troy Beckett's face in the moment between reaching for her jacket and finding out what happened to people who did that. There was a lesson in all of it, but it wasn't the one most people would expect. It wasn't about being fearless. It wasn't about being tough in the movie sense, the kind of tough that's just noise turned up loud. It was about preparation meeting the moment, about all those early mornings on the mat, all those competition nerves managed and converted into clean execution, all those hours spent drilling movements until they were so deep in the muscle that thinking wasn't required. It was about knowing yourself so precisely that the gap between who you are and what someone assumes about you becomes the space where you stay safe. The men on those bikes had looked at Maya and seen a narrative. A simple one, a familiar one. They had seen what they expected to see, and they had moved toward what they thought was a predictable outcome. The thing about predictable outcomes is that they depend on both parties playing their assigned roles. Maya had not played hers, and now 12 girls in a Houston gym were learning, one Saturday at a time, exactly how to do the same thing. How to break the grip of assumption before it fully closes. How to stay grounded and clear and ready inside the moment that wants to define you. How to be, in every room and every stretch of open road, exactly themselves. Don't ever mistake someone's quiet for weakness. Don't ever look at a person and think you already know what they're capable of. The most dangerous thing in the world to a bully is someone who has already done the work, who has already sat with the fear and metabolized it into something functional, who doesn't need to raise their voice because their posture already said everything. Troy Beckett learned that at a rest stop outside Beaumont on a September afternoon. He learned it on the concrete with the wind knocked out of him, staring up at a sky that looked completely different from that angle. And 12 girls in Houston are learning it every Saturday morning. One drill at a time, one session at a time, one confident step at a time. Because that's how it spreads. That's how it compounds. Not through a single viral moment, but through the steady, patient, unglamorous work of preparing the next person for the moment they don't see coming. Maya Donovan did not want to be a headline. She wanted to be a reason, and she already was.